Yeah, in case you didn't hear, I lost all my slides. I was meant to talk a little bit earlier today, but we had to shuffle things around, and I had everything you see here has been recreated in the last couple of hours. So, yeah, hopefully it goes all right. My name is Sebastian. I'm von Conrad on Twitter, which is also my last name. In case you haven't noticed that I have an accent, you will pretty soon. This is because I grew up here in Sweden, where it's very cold, and we have lovely Aurora Borealis in the wintertime. I also lived here for a while, which is very different from Sweden. And now I am here. More specifically there. I've been in Australia now for 5 years. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about what the worst part about being a Swede living in Australia is. Contrary to popular belief, it is not all the dangerous animals that wants to kill you. Not at all, actually. The absolute worst part about being a Swede living in Australia is the first thing that comes out of anybody's mouth when I tell them my nationality is ABBA. To set the record straight, I don't like ABBA, and if you talk to me about ABBA, we can no longer be friends. I will admit, however, that I have a deluxe set of Allen keys, which I use to assemble IKEA furniture with. Not just my own furniture, but I will happily help anyone who's bought something from IKEA. I also do guided tours at IKEA, where I don't just show you the way out, but I tell you what all the funny names actually mean of the furniture, because they all mean things, believe it or not. I work for Envato over in Melbourne, like Matt said. More specifically, for the last 18 months, I've been working on Microlancer. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Microlancer story. So, about 18 months ago, I came into work one morning and the CEO called me into his office, which is never a good sign, but in this case it kind of was. I was told that this new product idea that he'd had in the back of his mind for a while, and he wanted me to, build a new product with a new team and just kind of go. He had a 14-page Google Doc and 2 PSDs that he'd cobbled together the weekend before. And that was effectively it. That was the product plan. We started with a blank page, or terminal window really. We had a really tight timeline, lots of ideas because, new product, new exciting stuff, all new things. Oh, we should do this thing, we should do that thing. But we needed to get something together, and pretty quickly. We needed to ship better and faster than we had before, and so we took kind of this opportunity to really look at what it was that we felt had been working in previous jobs that we've had and in previous teams that we've been in, and take the best parts and really create a process, a workflow, a delivery that really worked and allowed us to ship. The title of this talk is based on this quote by Steve Jobs, which is "Real artists ship." I think the same is very much true for developers, and Cameron said the same thing in his keynote yesterday morning. You're not really a developer unless people are actually using your code. We did ship, but after we shipped, we needed to continue to do it. All of a sudden, we had all this other stuff that we had to worry about. We had bug reports from users, we had a production environment that we had to maintain, we had operational support and lots of these other things that we needed to keep working on while at the same time delivering new stuff, new features. And so far we've done that too. And this talk is really about the things that we've done that have really allowed us to do really good work and ship better and faster. I call it tenets of software delivery, which is possibly a little bit fancy. Tenet is a word that means any opinion, principle, doctrine dogma, especially one held as true by members of a profession group of movement. I think the key word here is principle. These are principles that we decided in the team worked for us and allowed us to get stuff out there. So let's jump into it with the first tenet, which is fake it until you make it. I'll leave this here for a little while. We shipped the first version of the product in 2 weeks. It was called Graphic Lancer, not Micro Lancer, and it was a seriously lo-fi version. It was cobbled together on Heroku. We were using a Zendesk and email and basically duct taped it all together. A little bit like this slide, actually. There was a lot of things we knew we would probably need later down the track, like we needed a messaging system so that people could communicate in the product. But we used email for that in the back end. We used Zendesk to power interactions. So we used lots of different products and platforms that we could just quickly hook into in order to get something live as soon as possible. We did this because we wanted to validate that our assumptions were correct. And we wanted to be able to test different things. Would people be willing to pay upfront? What were the price points? Which categories were people interested in? And doing all of this and getting something out there, allowing real people that we didn't know to buy real things using real money was a really powerful way for us to make sure that we were heading down the right track. But it also allowed us to build a foundation technologically. Because that blank page or that blank terminal window can actually be a little bit scary. So what we started out with, Graphic Lancer, actually became Micro Lancer. We changed pretty much every line of code, we renamed the app, we did a whole bunch of stuff, but Micro Lancer evolved out of Graphic Lancer. There was never a new Rails new or anything like that. The next tenet I call cut the crap, and this is really about your process. In the background here, I'm not sure how well you can see, that's at one point the actual card wall for Micro Lancer. We forgot Agile, Scrum, XP, Waterfall, all the different methodologies that I'm sure you've heard about, that I'm sure that people have been telling you that you should be using. We forgot about fancy software, estimates, epics and themes, classifying cards as, defects and chores and bugs and so on and so forth. We forgot all about that and just started to put some cards up on the wall. We had 3 columns, to do, doing, and done. We had one set of card, and it was just the only thing on the card was the task at hand. If you're remote, by the way, you can use Trello to do the exact same thing, but in my opinion, there's not really a substitute for a real card wall up on a wall somewhere. We did this because we realized that you kind of have to take an agile approach to your agile process. Realize that your process, just like your software and your requirements, will and must change over time. And the more stuff you add to it, like estimates and doing lots of different things, the more stuff you add on top of it, the harder it is going to be to actually iterate on your process. So, introduce complexity when it makes sense. We have estimates, or we did for a while. We don't anymore. We started classifying cards a little bit differently. We started writing cards a bit differently, and then we changed that again and again. And that's really the main thing that I want you to take out of this part is your process needs to be what you want it to be. Don't follow Scrum or Agile or XP by the letter, because that's trying to conform you and your team onto something else that isn't you. Instead, pull in stuff from all of the different things so that it makes sense to you. The next tenet was level up your continuous integration to continuous deployment. I'm assuming you do CI. If you don't, I would recommend that you get on that pretty quickly. So the way that it worked for us was we had a continuous integration environment that for every successful master build, pushed that build to our staging server, ran a couple of smoke tests, which are basically very high-level integration tests, and then pushed that straight to production. All of this happened automatically, so the merge pull request button, we used the pull request workflow very heavily, became our deploy button. That was the way that we got stuff out. This is possible when you trust your test suite. And it really introduced a mind shift change for the team. We started committing smaller bits of code and started pushing them out at much higher frequency, much less risk in terms of shipping stuff that broke. But we also saw quite quickly that the overall quality of the features increased. There were less bugs, and things were just more polished more and more as we went on. We wanted to realize value as soon as possible. So what this is basically about is, instead of having, a theme or an epic or something that has lots of different stuff in together, just ship everything one at a time. This will allow you to, instead of taking 3 weeks before you actually deliver any value to your users, you can ship incremental pieces of value as you go. And while that value of each and every single small thing might not be as big as the full thing, then you still have something, you get it to your users sooner, rather. It will also allow you to cut the tail of work towards the end. So if you have, say, 10 cards of work and you only get through the first 8, well, you've actually shipped the first 8 cards, and the other 2 you can leave if you want. We also didn't have any holdups. I've been in many teams, and I'm sure at least some of you have as well, where master or your production branch has not been deployable. Maybe something needed to go through some extra testing, or there was a bug or a problem or anything like that, and anything on top, any additional commits on top of that, couldn't actually go out until the blocker in your deploy process had actually gone out. Continuous deployment allows you to kind of bypass all of that. Continuous deployment is kind of a topic in and of itself, and I think that this is something worth exploring more. Fortunately, these 2 guys will talk about continuous deployment after this downstairs. Keith and Mario, they're standing over there, by the way. They both work with me on this project, so hopefully some of the ideas that I've shared will be explored in further detail when they talk. The next tenet is test in production. I had a troll phase in here, but it didn't make it into the second version of the slides. The first real obstacle that we got to when we started doing continuous deployments was that the business side of the product started going, no, you can't do that because we need control over when stuff goes out. We have this marketing thing that only takes effect at 12 p.m. or we haven't actually gotten approval for this thing yet, and whatever it might be. And the way that we solved that was not by stop doing continuous deployment, but to introduce feature flags. I think there's been a couple of other talks about feature flags as well, and I can't stress how crucial they have been to what we've done. It basically allows us to push things out as soon as we want to, or as part of our continuous deployment workflow, but turn them on at a precise moment in time that is under our control. The bonus part of this is we can actually test our features in production with real users, with real data, before it goes live to everyone else. There's a lot of different feature flag gems out there that allows you to segment flags for different users. So you can have admins or staff that actually gets access to a feature before it's live to everyone else. And that's an incredibly powerful way for us to make sure that things are working before they go out. We also started to feature flag our infrastructure. So for example, we have credit cards that you can pay for stuff with. We have PayPal. Both of these things are feature flagged. So whenever Braintree, which is our credit card gateway, goes down when they have an issue, we can just toggle that off at a click of a button. No deploys necessary, nothing. And the user who comes to that page only get the PayPal option. This is a really, really good way for us to kind of gracefully degrade the user's experience rather than give them a broken or shitty experience instead. And we've even gone so far as we've started scheduling these things to go on and off. I remember at one point somebody was doing some scheduled maintenance overnight and nobody wanted to stay up until 3 a.m. to actually toggle the flag off. So we just scheduled for the flag to go off for the scheduled maintenance, and then we pushed it back on again when the maintenance came off. The bonus round of this, which is kind of flipping it on the other side, is use your production data in development. So this is one thing that we did very early on. We started setting up CData, and because CData is a really good way for many people to get some tests data into your local development environment. We found that it was quite hard and quite time-consuming just to maintain the seed data, especially as we were iterating on the product very quickly. So it kind of became that we had to develop the feature, and then we had to do the seed data for it, etc., etc. So what we did was we imported our production data into development instead. We have a script that takes a couple of minutes to run. We'll pull down the latest database backup. It will import that, scrub some of the personal information like email addresses and so on and so forth, so that we don't accidentally do anything we don't want to do. Obviously, this doesn't work if your production database is big, but maybe you can grab part of the database, part of the tables, or something like that. I still think that using production data in your development environment is incredibly valuable and will allow you to spot problems sooner, especially if you have a lot of user-generated content, because you can't think of all the character encoding issues that you're going to discover with your actual users. The next tenet is the only way to move is forward. James is laughing because the background of the slide here is one of the guys on the team playing netball. We never roll anything back. We only ever roll forward. We've never done a git revert of a commit that's gone bad. Instead, we fix the problem. This is possible when you have feature flags and small incremental changes. It should be quick to find what the problem is and fix it. Rather than rolling back, we roll forward, so to speak. It will allow us to get back on our feet very, very quickly and to keep the shipping momentum going. Next tenet is live on the bleeding edge. I'm not sure how well you can see. This is part of the microlens gem file. It goes a little bit further down. I've removed a bunch of comments and stuff to get as much as I can on the slide. If you look at it closely enough, you will see that one thing that it's missing are versions. There are very, very few versions of any of these gems. And wherever there is a version, there's a comment explaining why there is a version there. That's because every morning we do a bundle update. Sometimes even multiple times a day. This is possible when you trust your test suite. Going back to Cameron's keynote yesterday morning, don't get stale. Don't waste time on managing dependencies. And you get all these new features and optimizations for free. Has this come back to bite us in the ass? Absolutely. I remember one time where there was an update to the grid, the CSS grid gem that we were using. It was a minor update, but as it turned out, and we figured this out later, we had been taking advantage of a bug in the gem. And this bug had been fixed in that minor version update. And so, you know, we did the bundle update, we ran the test suite, it all passed because functionally the site was all right. It was just that everything looked really weird. But, you know, we ran the test suite, it was all fine, so we pushed it up, and all of a sudden everybody was going, why does production look really, really bad? I don't have a particular solution to that problem. What I think I would like to see, and if anybody has, you know, time to do an open source project, I would recommend you do this one. I would love to have automated testing for your visuals in your application to make sure that a page looks the way you expect it to. Not just works the way you expect it to, but actually looks the way you expect it to. Still, even despite these setbacks that we've had, we continue to roll forward and keep doing bundle updates every morning, sometimes even multiple times a day, because it is really valuable. Next tenet, which is something we spoke about very early on, and something that's kind of came with us for the whole journey, is pay the refactor cost up front. So it's a fact you are going to be wrong. Might be that your code is wrong or your implementation is wrong. Could be that the product decisions that you are making are wrong. But you are going to be wrong at some point, and you need to account for that. So write your code knowing that you will refactor it. And I would even go so far as to say to write your code with the intention of refactoring it. Doesn't mean write bad code because you know you're going to replace it, but make sure that when you write code, it is going to be very easy to go back in and change it later. Even if you rush things out, which we've done every now and then, refactor it immediately. We had one point, so we shipped the product without being able to disable any users whatsoever, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So we didn't have any way to disable a user. We had somebody who was doing some very bad stuff on the site. We needed to disable him quickly. So we put a developer on it. He knocked out the feature in about 30 minutes, and it was a hack, right? We just hacked it together, pushed it out, disabled the user, and then we went straight on to actually refactoring that code. Before we picked up anything else, we refactored it. We wouldn't let that hack continue. Because I believe that technical debt is like financial debt, except the interest rate is completely unpredictable. So you need to make sure to pay it off as quickly as you can. But, and this is actually one of the things that I didn't really agree with when Cameron was speaking yesterday morning, don't schedule time to refactor stuff. Don't do it. Don't stop shipping value to your users. At no point do you want to do that. What you want to do instead, and this is a term that I'm borrowing from my McDonald's days, clean as you go. Yes, I did actually work at McDonald's. Clean as you go. Leave classes better than you found them. So spend that little bit of extra time. If you're going into a class in order to build a new feature or add something in there, spend that little bit of extra time while you're in that particular spot to clean up some methods, maybe put some stuff over here, basically refactor as you go rather than taking a month and saying, for the next month, we're going to clean all of this up. Don't do that. Continue to ship value. We did a few different things to make this easier for ourselves. We followed the single responsibility principle quite closely. We have so-called service objects, which you may have heard about. We have form objects. We have lots of different objects. We don't subscribe to the fat model skinny controller. We want skinny models, skinny controllers, and lots of different plain old Ruby objects that have specific responsibilities, making it easy to figure out which part of the app is responsible for what are the dependencies between different classes, and being able to effectively decouple things as much as possible. And if you do that, the more you decouple things, the easier it is to refactor. All right, next tenet, stay lean with YAGNI. Raise your hand, how many people have heard of YAGNI before? Quite a few. Excellent. For those of you who don't know what it means you ain't gonna need it. Lots of people, especially product people, love features. So it's often like, oh, we should be building this and we should be building that, and oh, we need a way to manage this and manage that. But no, you ain't gonna need it. I'm not always a subscriber to the 37 Signals, Basecamp school of thought, but this is one that they got absolutely right. Build half a product and not a half-assed product. Cut the feature scope down as much as you can. In order to do this, you need to not work on all the good ideas that you have. You only have to work on the great ideas. So any of the things that sound like a good idea, forget about it. Only work on what the most important thing is that you need. And don't do it even if you know you're going to need it. Like I mentioned before, we shipped Microlancer without a way to disable users. It took us 3 weeks before we actually had to do that, but that was 3 weeks that we could spend doing other things. That's opportunity cost that we've gained. Another example was when we started out, we didn't have any way to reverse a payment for paying people that have been using the platform. And it took us 8 months before we actually needed to do that. Next tenet is do things that don't scale. There's an XK CD, which is really good. It's been making its rounds on Twitter, and it's basically thinking about how much time am I going to save by automating this thing that I'm doing over and over. And let me talk about how we do fraud on Microlancer. How we handle fraud. We don't actually do fraud. So we started out and saying, okay, when we have a fraud situation, we need to refund the payment, we need to disable the user, we need to cancel this, we need to do all these different things. And that started out as a very, very manual process. A developer would use the Rails console, go in and say, all right, I need to do this thing and that thing and this thing and that thing. And over time, that evolved into a rake task. And after a while, we, and this took months and months and months before we actually built in a button in the interface to do it. But at that point, we'd been doing it X amount of times, and we had a really good understanding of what it actually was that we needed to do. All the different edge cases, all the different problems that we had had in handling these situations. So, don't automate until it makes sense to, or even at all. There's another XKCD, which I suggest that you look at, which is how long do you think you're going to shave off? How often do you do the task? And, over a period of 5 years, this is how much time you're actually going to save by automating it. Last tenet, time is value. You need to, I often hear people say things like, oh, I wish I had more time, I wish there were 30 hours in the day, etc., etc. I kind of look at it as crap. I don't subscribe to it. I think everybody has the same amount of time in a day or in a week. You just need to kind of spend it better. Make sure your tests are fast. Do faster deploys. Get a faster feedback loop to make sure that you're actually on the right track. Because you need to optimize the parts that you can control, like how long your test suite takes, or how long your deploys take, or how long it takes for you to get feedback on the thing that you're working on, so that you have more time to spend on those things that you can't control. You need to focus on delivering value constantly and focus on shipping better and faster. That's all I had. I'm not sure if we have time for questions, but yeah.
Boom. Gus. Wait for the mic. Wait for it.
Question from the boss. Thank you, Sebastian. That was excellent. I was interested in your comments around forgetting the formalities in early stage development. At what stage is it time to readopt those formalities of HR?
When it will make you go faster. So I'm a believer in that process for the sake of it is not going to help you move fast. So when you feel like you're getting slowed down because you don't have those additional bits, that's when it makes sense to bring them in. When there's a communication issue, when there's confusion, when people outside of your direct team don't understand what it is that you're doing, and as a result of that, things are actually slowing down, that's when it makes sense. You optimize for speed, optimize for shipping faster. And so whenever it makes sense to bring it in, that's when you do it.
Hi. Just going back to the you ain't gonna need it point.
Yes?
Why do you think that product people or business people crave new features? What's the main driver behind that?
That's a tricky question. I think a lot of the time people have a very complete view of something in their mind, right? They have an idea of this is the feature. You know, we're going to have a user management system, which means that we're going to have an ability. We're going to need user roles. We're going to need to be able to promote people between different roles. We need to have a way to delete users and update users and edit users and all these kind of things, and they kind of picture it in their mind of what the end result needs to look like, and therefore the requirements often become, let's build all of it all at once. That's a little bit how I view it, and I try to push back on that as much as possible. What is it that you actually need to do? Oh, you just want users to be able to sign up. Okay, cool. Let's just build that. Let's not build all the other stuff as well. Eventually we may, but in most cases, you're probably not going to need it. So, yeah, that's how I look at it.
Yeah, there's one here, John, and then there.
Can you explain a little bit more about not rolling back?
Yeah. So by not rolling back, I mean kind of specifically not going back to an earlier state of your product or of your code base. So don't use git revert. Actually, instead of reverting back to an earlier commit and pushing that commit out, actually fix the problem by adding more code or changing your code or refactoring your code.
But if your production site had a problem, you would,
Yes.
rather than trying to work out what's going, you would still roll back the code revision or not?
No, I would never roll back code revision. What I would do is I would use my feature flags to turn off that feature in the short amount of time that it takes. In the worst case, I'll put on a maintenance page and while we're actually fixing the problem. But we have never ever rolled back the code to a previous stage, even if we have really big problems.
So how long have you had a maintenance page up for?
I think the longest we've had a maintenance page has probably been like 15 minutes. Yeah.
You spoke first about continuous deployment to production, and how that it's important to have the test suite as a guardian or a barrier,
yes.
I guess. Then you spoke about, I presume that means the test suite needs to have good coverage and so on, and like
Sure.
in order to do that. And then you talk about you wanted to add, stylistic checking to the test suite and so on.
Yes.
And then you came and mentioned how it's important for the test suite to run quickly.
Yes.
How would you reconcile those two things?
So we've spent a lot of effort into optimizing our test suite for speed. Our entire test suite runs in about 1.5 minutes. And this is 1.5 years of code and thousands of tests. And we do enough tests that we feel very comfortable that they have very good coverage over our application, but they still run very, very quickly.
And do you do a lot of integration tests in it?
We do, yes. So we do unit tests and integration tests. The integration tests are the time-consuming part, absolutely. But unit tests are very, very quick to run. And the integration tests, we tend to focus on happy paths rather than every use case scenario, and let the unit tests kind of cover the edge cases.
Let's thank Sebastian.